All right, I think we'll get started. Hopefully people will join us as they come along. Welcome and thank you for sharing your time and joining us virtually. We'd hope this could be an in-person event, but part of the advantage is that we can have a real diversity of people join us. There's an incredible array of experience and diversity and knowledge in the participants that are joining. It's incredibly impressive. I want to deal with a few housekeeping issues first. So first, you may know there's translation interpretation available today for this session. So if you go to the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side, you'll see the option, and you can pick either English or Russian. So I recommend that you pick one or the other. If you're an English speaker, go to the English channel. If you're a Russian speaker, go to the Russian channel. If you don't pick a channel, you'll then hear what people say in the language of their choice. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other is that we do have a Q&A section at the bottom as well, and we invite you to pose your questions. We will have a Q&A session with our panelists, and we will look forward to receiving your questions. So please do go ahead and bring your questions to the table. I also wanted to start off by talking about why we believe it's important to talk about resilience in the Arctic and what resilience is. So when we talk about resilience, we're really thinking about how communities can bounce forward into and really deal with shocks. So we're in a situation right now where that's an incredibly important conversation to have. The pandemic is clearly an example of a shock. And I encourage you, if you're more interested in looking more at what resilience is and what we mean, that there's a reference video on our main page by Joel Clement, my colleague at the Harvard Arctic Initiative, and he does a great job of explaining some of the key elements of what we mean by resilience. Resilience is also incredibly important to the Arctic Council and the Sustainable Development Working Group, which I am the Executive Secretary of the Sustainable Development Working Group. We have a document called the Arctic Resilience Action Framework, and this forum is really meant as a foundation for that, that we really is guiding some of the work we do and recognizing that resilience is an excellent umbrella to do the work that we do. We've had 2 sessions in the Arctic Resilience Forum so far, one on food security and one on Indigenous youth leadership. And I think that what's really interesting about the session we're about to start on renewable energy is that energy is such an incredibly important foundation of everything that we do, and such an integral part. And so it's not just thinking about energy, but how to make an energy sustainable and renewable in Arctic communities that's so important. This session can't cover everything. We'd love to do everything in 90 minutes, but we know we can't. But we hope that we can really inspire and challenge and have a great conversation about energy, and that will pique your interest. And we hope that we'll continue this conversation about the sort of importance of energy and resilience in the Arctic. So with that, I would like to invite Chief Dana Tezia Tram of the Vuntutquitchin First Nation of Old Crow, Yukon, to say some opening remarks. Dana.
Masi Cho, and I appreciate the opportunity, and especially for the chance to shape such an important subject. But for myself, and as our minds are meeting here today, we are at the precipice and under the auspice of incredible change that our species has not seen in our lifetimes, but as well the amount of change in the planet. And what I think about is I reach through my own memories and through the oral traditions and teachings of my people, and I'm able to slide through time into their dispositions. When we first had electricity in our community in about 1978, my grandfather, it is said, could run with the Caribou. He could actually run at 19. And now his grandson is flying around the world with a supercomputer in his pocket. And as we, quote unquote, have progressed through the values of our economies and our societies, we have mistakenly left the bosom of and cradle of species, which is the land and the animals. But as a time where we make these choices, which will echo not only just through eternity, but through the generations, a time where our decisions are more important now, more than ever. I recognize the many issues and the stresses that are put, but I look to the many solutions that are there. And I know for our community, being able to reach out and take advantage of these technologies that are embodying our Indigenous values of living in balance with our land in perpetuity. So just in closing, I thank everyone for being here and for this opportunity in which we can share in many of our future solutions, many of which I think need to be recognized, that there are more and more every day. And yes, there are challenges in front of us, but there always have been. And it's in our coming together, our discussions, the opening of our minds and our hearts that galvanize the most humanistic of threads that not only bring us together, but will bring our children together and the solutions. I see.
Thank you so much, Chief Dana. I can really appreciate the messages that you're sharing with us today, and I think it's so incredibly an important way to start this conversation. I would now like to invite several colleagues who are going to share with you some examples of some case studies related to renewable energy. There are many examples across the Arctic and outside the Arctic where initiatives are reducing our dependence on diesel and looking for cleaner and more sustainable energy sources. We are sharing a few examples of where this is happening in the Arctic. The cases being presented are highlighting a spectrum of examples across different scales and in different geographies to illustrate the diversity and innovation that exists. In sharing how and why energy projects got started, what they're achieving, and why they're important, we encourage you to think about how energy contributes to a more resilient and healthy Arctic. We encourage you also to add your questions to the chat. We'll have some Q&A at the end of the presentations, and we hope that we can have a chance to work with some of your questions in that process. We would like to start with our first project, which is called the Snowflake International Research Station. It's a futuristic research station powered fully by renewable energy that's being led by the Russian Federation. Yuri Vasiliev is the executive director of the Institute of Arctic Technologies at the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, and he is joined by his colleague Oscar Noah, general manager for international affairs at the Bologna Foundation. Yuri, if you would like to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Jennifer. Dear friends, yes, I hope that you can see me. So I share on my screen will presentation. Is everything okay?
Looks good.
Okay, so that's the project of Arctic Council of Sustainable Development Working Group. The name is AHEAD, as Arctic Hydrogen Energy Applications and Demonstrations. Actually, we are talking about the establishing an open international Arctic station, which we call Snowflake. Snowflake is a unique international project. As I mentioned, we initiated the project to Arctic Council, and in June this year, the project was endorsed by all members, and we thank everybody to that. And we see that Snowflake is a, let's say, analog of the International Arctic or International Space Station, but in the Arctic. Of course, we plan wide international research and educational programs, development and testing new breakthrough technologies for implementation in the Arctic, not just for the Arctic, also for everyday life. And as we mentioned, Snowflake Station is, as we see, the global first of its kind, fully autonomous year-round diesel-free Arctic facility, powered by just wind and solar, and energy stored in hydrogen. So we want with our partners to demonstrate practically the most environmentally friendly energy technologies that are becoming a new technological basis of the 30s or 40s of the century. We plan the facility for a minimum of 80 guests. So 2 of the modules will be just for comfortable hotel rooms. And the total area is about 4,500 square meters. So on the screen, you can see the main functions of all the modules. And the module structure of the facility allows for gradual expansion of the station in the future. We locate the station in the foothills of the polar Urals, where Europe and Asia meet each other, near the Land of Hope settlement of local people. And we plan that Snowflake's visitors will not only work in the station, but also get to know the culture of the northern people of Yamal. And of course, it's a task, a very hard task for us to harmonize the presence of a high-tech facility with the everyday life and traditions of the indigenous population. Here we can see some slides, practically most real slides, what we plan to design, what we plan to construct. Here's the view from the lake. Here's from the parking and near the alley of flags. All-terrain vehicles are coming to the station with guests. Here's from the bird view. One more good picture. And of course, polar lights. And finally, I try to focus attention of everybody that we will not focus just on energy. We see that the station is a good platform for many disciplines. You can see most of them here on the slide. And now I'd like to ask our partner and friend Oscar from Norwegian Bellona Foundation to add my presentation and announce our online partner meeting. Thank you. Just a minute, I try to stop the translation. Good.
Here we go. Thank you, Yuri, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. First, I just want to share in short with you some of the reasons that Bellona is an official partner to the HEAD project and why we support the construction of the Snowflake Research Station. Bellona, for those of you who do not know, is a non-governmental or environmental organization, and our goal is to ensure a decarbonized society and restorative growth. And we deem that the Snowflake Research Station can be a strategic project to get us closer to reaching that goal. In short, the project will demonstrate how renewable energy can work in conjunction with hydrogen as an energy carrier to power a multi-purpose facility in the Arctic. And to Bellona, hydrogen is a very attractive future energy carrier due to it being emission-free when used, and the fact that it can be emission-free in production, like here at the research station. Bellona deems it very likely that hydrogen will be used as a fuel for heavy-duty transport and as an energy carrier in larger energy systems in the future. And having tested this out in Arctic conditions is of potentially great importance, and the experience acquired can also be used elsewhere, both in Russia and abroad. For example, to replace hydrocarbons as the main energy source for many remote settlements in the Arctic and to create greater energy security. And the Snowflake Research Station can also be a platform for important research on Arctic and the climate. And the project's goal is to facilitate research cooperation across borders. And with that in mind, I want to let you know that on behalf of the partners in the HEAD project, that those of you that are interested in more information on the HEAD project and Snowflake could join us on the 2nd of November when we are arranging an open online meeting. Here we will have the time to go deeper into details about the research station. We also hope for feedback on the project and welcome suggestions from both public and expert groups. The goal is to understand how we can maximize the benefit of this project and any constructive feedback still has the potential of being included in the final plan. Thus, I invite you all to join us on the 2nd of November to participate in the discussion. More information can be found on the homepage of the project, arctic-mipt.com. So I hope to see you.
And Oscar, it's actually in the chat right now for everyone. If they would like to register for the event, we've put the information in there for you. So please take that information, and I encourage you to participate. Sorry, not to interrupt you.
No, excellent. That was all from us in Bologna for now. Thank you for your attention.
Wonderful. Yuri, do you want to turn your camera on again for just a minute? I wonder if you could share with us where you see the AHEAD project in 10 to 15 years.
Yuri, you want to go first?
You need to turn your camera, or you're muted, Yuri.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. Please.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, of course, we are trying to be very fast in starting all the operation, our programs, and we think that we'll start from 23rd. So in 10, 15 years, I hope that it will be a real international big point of interest, let's say, for scientists, but not only for scientists, for students, for high schoolers. And we hope, you see, the main result of the station is new technologies which comes to our life, for Arctic life, and as I mentioned, from space technologies, which are also come after space. They come to our, let's say our days life. So I hope that it will be a very big list of international technologies or projects, or some new initiatives which will be able because of the station.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to you both, and I look forward to asking you more questions during the general Q&A. I'd now like to invite my colleague Gudmundur Sigurðsson, and my apologies for the pronunciation, who is from Akureyri and the general manager of Vistorka, a town, and Akureyri is a town that's transitioning to renewable energy, and we're going to hear about that now. Please.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our town Akureyri in the north part of Iceland. Akureyri is a municipality, and it's located in the longest fjord in Iceland, Eyjafjörður. The area in Eyjafjörður has a population of 25,000 people, and is by far the most populated outside the capital area, and has around 5-hour drive from the capital area, Reykjavik, from Reykjavik. This fact and this situation means that Akureyri has a large role in leading forward the rural areas in North Iceland, and at the same time has to deal with the challenges of small scale when it comes to implementing green initiatives. One approach Akureyri took was to set up Vistorka, where I'm working, 5 years ago. Vistorka was set up as a limited company and is owned by the local energy company, which again is owned by the municipality of Akureyri. Board members of Vistorka have been selected, linking the different branches of the community together. The board has one member from the city council, the rector of the university, a member of the business development agency, and a member of the energy agency of Iceland. With this setup, Vistorka is a great platform for green initiatives and adds to the already operating companies that in many cases lack the resources for development and innovation, again, because of small scale. Our focus has been, how can we help the people in the area live as green lifestyle as possible? In order to make that happen, we try to introduce solutions that take away all excuses for the individual. First, we tried to look at the problems, and we identified activities with the largest carbon footprint. So we looked at the day-to-day energy need of the person. That is heating, electricity, transport, and food. As you almost know by now, almost all heating and electricity in Iceland is from renewable resources. So that was an easy part of the job, apart from one spot that I will talk about in a minute. And also for over 10 years now, we have a composting plant that has been operating in the area. And around 80% of all organic waste from the homes passes through that plant. And nutritious fertilizer is produced that people can pick up at selected locations for their garden, for example. We also use it on the golf course and the football courses and all that. Also, since 2012, we have been collecting used cooking oil to produce biodiesel. And since 2014, we have been producing methane or methane as vehicle fuel from the old landfill. All good examples of circular solutions that we already have in place. The place I mentioned where we are still using oil to produce heat and electricity is Grímsey. Grímsey is an island north of Iceland with a population around 60 people and is a part of Akureyri community since 2009. The island is not connected to the national grid, to the national energy grid, that is, and is 100% run on diesel engines. Grímsey is therefore one of the last places in Iceland where all heating and electricity is produced with oil. Vistorka and the Icelandic Energy Agency have already put forward a proposal of 10 kilowatt solar panels and 2 6-kilowatt windmills, including a battery pack made of batteries from damaged electrical cars. We are hoping this project will commence in November and be fully operational next year. This could reduce the production of black electricity, so to speak, in Grímsey by 50%. Apart from Grímsey, the people living in Akureyri can now choose to sort all the waste and make sure that all organic waste is turned into energy, charge their electric car or take methane for their private vehicle, or even hop on the bus that is free of charge, and 2/3 of the public transport runs on the local methane. And like many others, we are seeing a big rise in the use of e-bikes, of course, for the daily transport. So we believe we are well on our way to make it possible to live a very environmental friendly lifestyle in Akureyri, which is in the north part of Iceland. Thank you very much.
What a fabulous example. Thank you so much. It's almost overwhelming how diversified your work with renewable energy has become. I don't think it's unfair to say that Iceland is a leader when it comes to these sorts of new innovative approaches to renewable energy. I wonder what you could say about, are there other communities outside of Iceland that you feel could learn from this experience? I mean, it's a unique environment, Iceland, but what can others learn from it?
Yes, like you say, of course, we are standing on the shoulders of the geothermal heat, and you know it's a hot spot. So we're lucky in that way. We also have the hydropower. Again, we're lucky with that. But we have been smart enough to utilize it for our benefit, and you know, I think it would be very difficult to live in Iceland with everything running on oil. For other communities to learn from this, you know, it takes years, and it takes I would say politicians that have long vision. You know, you have to have patience and all that. So it's a challenge, but of course, a lot of this in Iceland, the story is well known. You know, it came from the oil crisis and all that. But now we have the climate crisis. So again, you know, this should be something to push other countries in the same direction.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I look forward to asking you more questions during the Q&A.
You're welcome.
I'd now like to invite my colleague Berit Kristoffersson, who's an associate professor at the, oh, I just lost my notes. Just a second. You hit send, or you started your session so quickly. Hang on.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. She's an associate professor at the Arctic University of Norway at the Arctic Center for Sustainable Energy, and she's going to be speaking to us about Smart Senja, an innovative energy system for small communities in Norway. Please, Berit.
Thank you very much. Since we want to design viable coastal Arctic communities, we need to plan both in the short and long term for energy. And to do so, we need both the societal and technical expertise. And in this project, we actually have 4 PhDs. So I have Carolina Ingebrigtsen here with me, who does her PhD on energy storage in this project, but we work very closely together. And she has the background from SINTEF, a research institute, thank you. And she has education as an engineer in energy and climate planning. Yeah. So the Smart Senja project, you see here, this is sort of what it looks like now, Northern Lights every night. And if you can see behind the screen on the left, if you don't have us in front there, there is one island called Husøy, and then you see on the other hand, you see another community called Senjahopen. And this is the 2 small communities where we will help assist and build a new hybrid energy system with smart solutions. So just to give some brief background, the Smart Senja project got funded by Enova, which is a governmental agency who funds innovation projects. And we have also financed 4 PhDs at the university in connection to this project that we have funded independently. But when we do work with the grid company, who is the project owner, and power company, Ishavskraft, and we work very closely with them in designing these energy solutions. And it's also interesting that the energy providers and grid providers are publicly owned. And as you see here below, there's a number of tech companies. But I'm gonna move forward and we're gonna look at some of the solutions we're working on. So we are at a very early stage in the project. We started a year ago. If I can move here, let's see, this way.
You've
Okay,
muted.
sorry,
Oh,
we're having, yeah. There. It's a good thing that I have someone with technological expertise here with me.
Yeah, in the communities, we have a lot of fishing boats, and we have a large fish process industry. We have schools and other public buildings, and also households. So I try to illustrate the communities here in this figure. And they are supplied by the national electricity grid. But the communities are expected to grow a lot, especially the fish industry. So they will need more and more electricity. In addition, electric fishing boats are coming, and so are electric cars and buses, which will increase the demand for electricity even more. This means that the grid connection will be too small to supply all this electricity. So what we're looking at is to, instead of building a new power line, what can we do locally and with renewable energy solutions? So one thing is local energy production. So we're looking at the possibility of having solar panels and also wind energy in the area. However, these renewable energy sources, they don't always produce electricity in the exact moment when we need it. It's very variable. So then we're also going to install one battery in each community. Actually, the largest batteries so far in Norway, so that when the electricity demand is low, we can charge the batteries, and when the electricity demand is very high, we can use electricity from the battery as well as from the grid. We're also installing energy management systems both in the households and in the industry buildings to avoid these peaks in electricity demand. So all of these solutions together, hopefully, will postpone the need for a new line and create a renewable power community.
Yeah, we will listen. Okay, so how do we work together on this? So one of the things we are actually thinking is that technologies only half the puzzle. We need to work together and sort of put them side to side. And to do so, for the first year and in a pre-project we had, the first thing we did was to involve the schools. So here to the left, you see Carolina and our other PhD student from her department, Odin, who has been teaching them about sun energy. He's called the Sun King. They call Carolina here the battery queen at school. And they also learned a lot about wind from different perspectives. We also bring in social scientists, meteorology, mathematics, and ethics. And here on the right, you see we have energy cafes twice a year where we teach people about energy, tell them how they can get involved in the projects, how we do this in their private homes, for example. And in the middle here, it says when the fishing factory needs power, Jimmy lowers the heat on his floor. So Jimmy is a fisherman, and we call this smart home system the Jimmy box. So we actually involve people, and they become also very integrated into the project. And one thing I think is interesting when we, for example, involve the schools, I'm going to go back to the tech session here, and that is that the local school kids, for example, said in a Lego League competition they took part of that they wanted small wind mills at the bridge going over to the island Husøy. So that's actually one thing we're looking at. And we are now in Lofoten, where we had the Lofoten Energy Week, and we brought some people from Senja last year, and they got really interested in what we're working on in our research group on charging stations. So now they're challenging us back at how can we design charging stations that works for these communities, as they want to have viable communities still based on fisheries and increased tourism. And then this becomes part of their planning as well. I could say more, but I think I'll take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. It looks like a fabulous project. And again, it's showing this sort of innovation and drawing on different types of renewable energy, which really seems to be a theme here of the opportunity to do that. I wonder if you can tell me, it obviously is quite a multidisciplinary group. Like you're dealing with academics, you're dealing with community members, you're dealing with business. How do you manage this kind of extremely multidisciplinary research project?
Yes, that is a big challenge that we are having a lot of fun with. For example, it's designed as an innovation project, but it's also a research project. So for example, like the wind example I gave in the way we teach it, we also work within our group. And we have our communication officer, Johannes, here with us, who's also struggling, at times to figure out how are we really organized. But what the good thing we have is that we applied for funding for 4 PhDs in an internal competition at the university, which has worked out so well. We have, and they work really well together. So they are now completed their first year. But that's also a really important insight, is how we put different disciplines together in a research project. So we're learning every day, and part of the reason why we were really happy about this invitation is that we want to learn from other projects at this stage. So for example, all of the projects presented this far is relevant for us.
That's great. Thank you so much, and we'll have you back again for the Q&A, so thank you so much. Our last presentation brings us back to Chief Dana, who is going to tell us about an Old Crow solar project, which is moving from diesel to solar power in Canada. And he is, as I mentioned, the Chief chief of the Vuntut-Gwitchin government in Old Crow. So Dana, if you would like to tell us your story, that would be great.
Masi Cho, Drin Gwinzi Chalaknai. Good day, all of my relations. And just starting off, I think it's important, some background. As a small rural community, we are 80 miles north of the Arctic Circle in the Yukon Territory. We're over 100 miles from any other community. We are a small village of 250 people that are not connected to any major road system or any road system at all, nor any centralized energy grid. Our people have been occupying this area, as archaeological evidence suggests, going back 27,000 years ago, just 30 kilometers from our community. But our oral traditions and our oral history reaches back even further into the past. And having access to our history, I constantly ask myself how a people were able to thrive in an inhospitable environment. And when we speak about energy, there are opportunities to engage Indigenous values and ideas, because we survived off of the energy systems local to our areas, in the animals and in the plants and in the nutrients, all driven by the sun. So in this respect, our solar energy project is a deft application of modern technology, unlocking economic and energy sovereignty in our community. We began our work in solar panel and solar energy in 2008, but really fomenting this project of our solar farm in the community beginning around 2016, 2017. What I would like to concentrate on is we all understand solar energy farms and solar energy panels, but what we were able to accomplish in the Arctic as the Canadian National Engineering Service and Award Ceremony, their words, not mine, said that the independent power producer and the electricity purchase agreement documents that our government, the Vuntut-Gwitchin government, forged will change the country of Canada, and has an ability inherent in its very nature to unlock energy sovereignty across the world. As we look moreover in the successes of our centralizations, I see, and we are proving, that a viable movement forward is decentralizing energy grids, like we're now seeing with the fires in Australia. Communities with microgrids did not need the same level of national emergency and health that others who had not. We have a simple 2,000 bifacial panel facing array, and they do not move. We've found that even in the Arctic with minimal daylight, through refraction, which is sunlight bouncing off of snow, we even do get electricity off of this. So with our energy system, and again, for a community of 250 people, what we have been able to do with the independent power producing regulation that orders us to be an independent power producer, but moreover, the electricity purchase agreement governs the fiscal relationship between our local utility and our community. Whereas in the past, and because we have no road system, there's actually diesel that is flown to our community by jet, by planes. And we burn it in a diesel generator in the community, to which we were purchasing electricity at some of the highest costs in Canada at about 78 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, through our electricity purchase agreement, we are selling the shareholders of the local utility savings in operations and maintenance. We are selling them sunlight at 64 cents per kilowatt hour. We have utilized the power of the sun and photons through a photovoltaic system that converts them to electrons through a microgrid system, delivering it to our community. And we will be unlocking $410,000 per year. With over the lifespan of the project of 25 years, we will have brought in $10.5 million for a community of 250 people. So what we've effectively done with this technology is to unlock our centralized relationship, where our fiscal energies were going to another shareholder, therefore draining our community. by completing this circle, we are now using the solar energy project, but moreover, we are looking at the renewability and self-sustainable through money management. And now our community will be having access to $10.5 million, whereas for decades we did not. These monies will be siphoned into new projects, biomass, wind energy, etc. And we have given birth to a new form of economic and energy cycles, creating the sovereignty that our people thrived upon in such a harsh environment. Merci.
Thank you so much, Chief Dana. I think this is such a great example of how this type of renewable energy project can empower a community. I mean, as you've described it so beautifully. I'm curious. It's a big development, I assume, and it's close to the community. Can you talk to me about how you went about engaging community members and elders in the discussion about what the trade-offs are for this type of project?
I think the first overarching concept is we had the projected ability to reduce 680 tons of CO2 a year through avoided diesel combustion and transportation. So this was a mandate that came very easily from the community. We held very open and wide community sessions that we had young children all the way to our elders. And we engaged with specific groups as well. And as an Indigenous peoples, of course, with the diesel reduction and satisfying energy consumption in a renewable way, there was no pushback from the community, and we had full support right across the board. But just quickly as well, I would like to add that the elders were the only ones who gave us some very stern words, which was we were not to build this project over a local berry patch. And this was actually the best area. So what we ended up doing was moving the berry hedges in between the solar panels. So you have plants that are utilizing the same technology through their chloroplasts and creating nutrients. So our elders will be picking berries in an ancient, time-tested natural energy system beside a new, modern, technological one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to get you to stay on the line, and I'm going to ask our other panelists to come back on so we can try and answer some of the questions from the audience. And we also have some questions that came in before the event that we'd like to get to as well. So if everybody wants to turn their cameras back on, that would be excellent. Here we all come. Well, we get started. And before I take one of the questions from the audience, what's fascinating to me about this is all of these projects really speak to meeting community needs. You can hear about renewable energy for many different purposes, but all of these seem to be really driven by community needs. I got a real sense of that with Chief Dana's story. I wonder if others would like to speak to what it means to advance these projects and recognizing that the community is an important aspect. If anybody would like to speak to that. Barrett, you look like you want to say something.
Sorry, we started discussing the questions. There are so many good questions. What was your question? Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit.
All right. Well, I was just asking, that they're really driven by community needs. These questions, what really strikes me about all of these is the importance of being driven by community needs. In the example, I'd even say in Snowflake, there's a real sense of the fact that the Snowflake Station will exist in a community. So I'm curious how that affects the project when that's the driver.
I think for Smart Senja, it's important because they know they have this energy needs. They can't develop any further if they don't get more energy. So it's interesting. For example, there's a lot of resistance towards wind power in Norway at the moment. But what we are looking at, for example, is a very small scale wind power and looking at introducing bigger solar panels, for example, at the factories. and also being very considerate of not going into, you know, areas where where you have wildlife, and that is sort of yeah. And we also have indigenous population at Senja, so we really want to stay out of the way of other people's way of life and livelihoods. But I also think it's a good question from Tassel here about efficiency on housing. Our communication officer Johannes here has looked at, you know, how can we come out and actually help them with making their houses better and having kind of free consultation on that. So I think when we talk about renewable energy, it's easy to forget about that we need to save energy, and that's a very important part of the way we need to organize our societies and especially local communities.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yuri, I wonder if you could speak a bit about the role of the indigenous communities around Snowflake.
Yeah, of course. Actually, that people, they asked us, when the first time we were not far from that place, we asked them the project which will help them with energy, because in that place, there are very bad situation with energy. Even goods they have to buy about 500 miles away from that place. And of course, it's the lowest level. How can we help them with the energy supply? But actually, a month ago, we visited, well, engineers, well, my team, we visited the place, and we started our design works, and we talked a lot with local people. Well, Anna Nerkagi, she's a head of the settlement, and when she saw us, she said that now I believe that it will happen. And you see that it's a very big level you give us. We must be at your level, so it's very hard to be with you near the station. So we want, after you come back to Moscow, we together will try to think what we have to change in our settlement to be ready for international tourists, to be ready for high-tech some technologies. And they see that it's not just technologies for their life. They understand that we'll try to test some new approach and new technologies for them. And after them, we'll transfer the technologies to other settlements. So that works. And you see this woman, Anna, she was nominated this year for the fourth time for the Nobel Prize as a activist and writer. So, and she's very, very good woman. We want to help that settlement for Caribou.
Wonderful, thank you. I now have a question from Jan Dusik, and it's to all the panelists. He's asking, how has the COVID-19 restrictions impacted your project, both through short-term restrictions, but also for long-term vision and objectives? I mean, if in some ways, and I'm now adding into the conversation, but in some ways it reinforces the need in order for resilience to have these types of things. But I'm curious what your Gudmundur, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, sure. I think a lot of the preparation, it doesn't affect the preparation because we're in that phase now. But I know of projects that are ongoing at the moment. Of course, we're an island and it's difficult to arrive. We have to have expertise if we are buying equipment. We have to have experts from the manufacturer come in and, you know, do all the installation maybe and the testing and all that. So that will delay, of course, and has been delaying some projects. We're not in that phase yet in Grímsey, but I can see that be one of the concerns.
Excellent, thank you. Chief Dana, what about for your project?
It has proved to be extremely difficult as we don't have the technical expertise within our community. So we were relying on technical consultants from outside of the country, from Germany as well. So because of the pandemic, we weren't able to do a full launch of the project. which means that we have what they call soft penetration. So the project will be able to directly put energy onto the grid, but not through our microgrid controller, which would ensure that it would be done in a way in which our diesel generators could be shut off. Because our battery system has enough electricity for 1 hour, which is enough time for the diesel generator to safely shut down and safely start back up. So unfortunately, our diesel generators are still running, but once clearance is given and the pandemic kind of settles down a bit, then we'll be able to bring in the technical expertise that can bring the project to its full viability. But in the long term, I think this only proves even more the need for communities to have that energy sovereignty, especially rural communities and especially communities on diesel generation. And it just shows the importance of this independence for a community at the end of the day to be not only self-determining, but self-sustainable. So we will be providing further investments, as this project alone would have satisfied 1/4 of our entire community's needs. So unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, we have not been able to achieve that goal this year.
Great, thank you very much. Now I have a question from George Rowe, and George must be very enthusiastic about this question because he posed it before the session and has also posed it now. And it is, what are some of the best practices for sharing lessons learned between these various initiatives? So both within intra and trans-regional, in a regional sense. So how have you been drawing expertise from other groups, and how do you share your expertise? Is anyone interested in taking that on?
I would be.
Please, Dana.
There are a number of different hubs that we use. There is the Indigenous Clean Energy Network in Canada, as well as using our country, Canada's mandates towards carbon neutrality. So under existing governmental mandates with other organizations, we lateralize our information, which also gives us the ability to reach through their networks. But what I'm very happy to share as well is anyone on this call will be able to go to the Yukon government's website and or through the share or the ATCO, the utility, and you can actually see the template of IPP and EPA documents. That is the independent power producing and the electricity purchase agreement documents. So those are the template documents of how we were able to create this renewable fiscal relationship, which parallels the solar energy project. And I think that's a really important question. And I think moving forward, it's really important that we use these touchstones when we consider energy sovereignty in our communities and in our own home regions. And we've been very clear as a government on our intent to be a full open book and sharing all of our information. We even share our feasibility studies and some of the more technical aspects with other First Nations in the Yukon and across the world. Merci.
Thank you. What about for Snowflake? Are examples that, are you drawing on best practices and lessons learned from other experiences or other projects in order to inform the work you're doing now?
Perhaps I could comment shortly on that.
Please.
I mean, for us in Bologna, we think that the cooperation between different stakeholders in society is very important when we try to find good solutions to environmental problems. That goes for NGOs, business, research institutions, and authorities. And as an NGO, part of our job is to facilitate this cooperation and create platforms for discussion on these issues and their solution. And to some extent, our ambition with Snowflake is also to aid in creating a platform where such experience exchange or where benefits can be shared and knowledge also can be shared. And I think we in Bologna have lots of experience in creating these type of platforms, but Snowflake is unique in that it is supposed to benefit research that will also benefit us all. We think that good scientifically sound info is the foundation on which we can make smart decisions. And that is, of course, true for us as NGOs as well. So if we can, as we plan to do, facilitate a strengthened international research environment through this project, then that will be beneficial far beyond the scope of those who are directly involved in the work on the Snowflake Research Station, but also make itself concretely known to others through us in Bologna creating platforms for discussion on the findings from that research. That is part of our goal.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we're quickly running out of time. I've got one last question, and it's for Berit. Could you talk a bit more, and I mean short, about the energy cafes and their role? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So instead of having like public meetings where we talk and we come, here's the solutions, we have tried different ways of organizing these cafes. And one of the ways we organize it is that people in the communities tell them about their experience with, for example, solar or this Jimmy box. But we also sit down with at tables and take notes and systematize it, and students use it, the PhD students use it. But we were discussing this in the back here, that this has been a problem for especially the students.
Yeah, it has been difficult to do field work and to discuss with the community, like new ideas they have and stuff like that. And also the teaching at schools have been a bit difficult now. It's been put a bit on hold because of the restrictions. Mm.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Okay, well, I want to thank you all so much. I wish we could spend more time on the questions and comments. I know there's more questions out there, but I've really enjoyed the information you've been able to provide. We haven't got to all the questions, but there is a Slack channel if people want to continue the discussion there. And there's also the information about each of the project. There's quite a bit of information available on the website as resources. So I hope that you will continue the conversation. As you can see, each of these projects has drawn on a variety of expertise, people, and resources. And I think it will be really exciting to continue to follow how these things are advanced. I think what are some of the interesting sort of common things that we found, and that really these do need enabling factors for these projects to be successful. At any scale, we can really see from these projects that you need champions. You need people that are really sort of advancing the project at a local level and really moving the project ahead. We also heard a lot about the role of communities and of networks of experts, and that it's really important to think about how you access those networks and how you leverage those networks to have a successful project. And I think the other thing that is really interesting to explore from all of these different examples is what were the drivers behind the project, and what made this be something. What's the vision behind why we're putting energy and effort into more sustainable energy solutions? And it's a complex and dynamic environment, and it will be really interesting to see how all of these projects advance and how others can learn from it, because there will be more of this, and we need to see more of this. But we also see, and my last point is that all of these things take time. They take time and energy and expertise. This is not something that can happen overnight. And so there really does need to be that level of commitment, and whether it's political commitment or community commitment, these are incredibly important things to commit to. So in order to do that, when we were going through the process of preparing this session, we thought about some of the tools that are available to communities in the Arctic. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Devlin Fernandez, who's the Executive Director of the Gwich'in Council International. GCI, Gwich'in Council International, has been incredibly involved in renewable energy efforts. And so she is very well positioned to speak to some of the tools that are relevant in the Arctic Council, or in the Arctic context. Thank you, Devlin.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen, and to the Arctic Council Sustainable Development Working Group and Harvard Balfour Center for having me. As Jen said, I serve Gwich'in Council International, one of the permanent participants at the Arctic Council, and I'm joining you from Chief Dry-Geese territory in the Acacho region, the traditional territory of the Yellowknives Dene First Nation. So I'm going to highlight 4 types of tools and resources and share some of the examples from the Sustainable Development Working Group, which has supported the development of these resources for those wanting to learn, advance projects, and connect with others engaged in this energy work. Again, I'd also echo Jen in noting that there is so much out there. There are many, many tools and resources targeted to different scales and audiences, and I encourage you to share your favorites on the Slack channel. So the first type of tool is data repositories or databases that compile information to help identify, analyze, and collect data. This could be helpful in showing you what the renewable energy potential is in an area, what projects and infrastructure exist, or where the demand is. And an example is the Arctic Renewable Energy Atlas, or AREA program, that has an interactive data map and a bunch of videos from communities highlighting their transition to different types of energy. The second type of tools are networks that bring people together either virtually or in person and can provide support, mentorship, peer connections, experiences, and learning. Networks can be formal or informal and are invaluable in building connections. The Arctic Remote Energy Networks Academy, or ARENA, is one example that is hosted by the Arctic Council, and it seeks to provide participants with the knowledge, skills, and collaboration networks to develop clean energy projects in their communities or regions with a view of achieving balance between economic viability, energy security, and environmental and public health in the circumpolar Arctic. I am thrilled that some of the ARENA cohort could join us today, and a special welcome to you. There are other networks, including the Indigenous Clean Energy Network in Canada, that Dana mentioned, and the UArctic Thematic Network on Renewable Energy. Related to this are things like conferences and symposiums that bring people together and provide opportunities for inspiration, sharing, learning, and development. The third type of tools are resource books, guides, and toolkits that can help you plan, deliver, and develop projects. I am especially proud of this, the Arctic Community Energy Planning and Implementation Toolkit, which walks you through designing and implementing your own community plan and contains templates, activities, case studies, and worksheets, and it's available online. Bonnie's just put it up in the chat. Sorry, Brittany's just put it up in the chat. Now, the fourth type of resources are the entities, the organizations, businesses, and governments who are offering webinars, publications, tailored expertise, incentives, and policy. Policy can be an extremely important and effective tool in change. And on that note, I'm going to pass it back to Jen to dive deeper into the role of policy and how it could work in the context of renewable energy. So Masi Cho, thank you very much for your time.
What a fabulous transition, Devlin, and thank you very much. All incredibly important, and as you can see, there's a lot of that information going into the chat for you now. Again, also material that's available on the resource section for registration of this event. I'm now very pleased to invite Christine Linda Arnadóttir, who's the chair of the Arctic Council's expert group on black carbon and methane, and she is a policymaker. And so we've asked her to come and join me for a Q&A about the importance of policy in this. It's an interesting, in all the panel discussion, or in all the presentations we've had so far, we haven't necessarily talked about how important it is to have an enabling environment from a policy perspective in order to really support this work. So I'm going to ask Christine to talk to us now about some of this. So Christine, maybe you could start by, what do you see the role of policymakers being in this? What's important about policymaking in this context?
Well, for me, and as you can see from all these great projects that we have gotten some introductions on, it is of course about inclusion and sort of like looking at sort of like what is the problem, look at the local conditions, and sort of like we have been in many ways gone to sort of like big policies that should fit all. And now, especially since we are talking about resilience, we have also seen that these kind of policy, they don't work really well for local communities and even remote communities. And even if you're not so remote, but sort of like if you talk about resilience and needing to be always connected, then if that connection cuts because of some bad weather or something happening, sort of like you are more vulnerable than before. So it is this looking at both the big picture, but also in the Arctic community perspective. It's the local level, looking at what is really the problem, what are the enabling factors, and being very soon in the process of talking to people. I thought it was also really interesting in our talk here, sort of like the link between technology and then local knowledge and working with what you have. The story that you got from Akureyri in Iceland, he said, we are lucky to have these warmth, sort of like geothermal. Well, it's sometimes not that lucky. For example, when the volcanoes are erupting or the earth is moving a lot. So it is using also what you got. So policies, they need to be really inclusive and broad. And I think the age of sort of like big fits all is basically a little bit over.
You really see at this point that the process of making policy has really changed, which is what you're talking about including people. It's no longer that governments really sort of sit in their own rooms and make policy. There is that discussion that needs to happen. And do you get a sense that when it comes to advancing renewable energy, that policymakers are including and listening and engaging people in a different way and making the relevant policies for renewable energy?
I think in general, we are getting better at it. Of course, we are also doing this big policy that you're looking at sort of like national or regional level. But the things that you hear that are new is like power communities, independent power communities, so that you make the regulation as to include those, not just thinking about big producer or big users, but looking at the on community level. And also what we have experiencing throughout the years now is that, for example, in renewable energy, and you could hear it from Norway, where the people are, for example, are getting more and more against wind energy. And that is because maybe you are not connecting the windmills with your local conditions that you are using the energy. However, if you put the windmills or the solar panels where it most fits your community, of course, then you are addressing the issue in a totally new way.
Excellent. Now, the reality is that in the Arctic context, there's very different types of government, so that it can be hard to assess across. There's different scales of government and of policy. So how do you design policies for various scales? How do you make them flexible so they can work together? And using an example from the Canadian context, you have the federal government, but you also have territorial governments. You have First Nations governments and Inuit governments. How do you manage all those different levels of policy?
Well, of course, it is rather complex. And that is one thing that we have been doing in the expert group on black carbon and methane, is asking the national, because all the national authorities give us a national report, and we ask them to tell us how their structure is built, sort of like, so that we have a better and a clearer understanding of who to talk to in different countries. But you can also, so that when you are designing a policy, that you are mindful of that a thing that is maybe on a municipal level in one country could be at a national level in another. And you can feel there is a little bit of a friction there. And that's why it's also really important for these policies to be sort of like inclusive and have in mind the local communities that are going to work with these policies.
That's great. Now you've started to head down this track already, but my next question is how can international cooperation be useful for the energy transition in the Arctic? You know, you have very different countries, different contexts. What's the benefit of international cooperation in this context?
Well, of course, a meeting like this is very beneficial for policy and renewable energy. For us working in the Arctic context, I think it's really beneficial that we are sharing experiences like we do in the TBCM group. We have certain priorities or that we want to achieve. So we put forward some recommendations. We follow through how each countries are doing towards that recommendation. However, also sort of like realizing that it is different between the different countries, how they work with these recommendations. So there are so many excellent examples that we are getting from these national reports that need to be highlighted. And I think that is sort of like what, and getting together is what sort of like drive forward this work. And you can see it sort of like you pick up an idea that you hear in a meeting, that you see in a report, could this work for me? And then get someone who knows that project on a local level to introduce it. So it is, I think it's extremely important that we in the Arctic, we also come together at this international forum.
Wonderful. Now I have a question from the audience from Peter Sherwin. There we go. Do you think policymakers in the Arctic have enough easy to understand information about the questions that they should be asking when considering new policy or key decisions? I think that's a great question. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's really a really good question, since sort of like my background is law, and working with different people in different disciplines. We use different acronyms, and sometimes I think we are not good enough to get the information that we need, that we want to give to the policymakers in a easily understood way. And I always say that even you have the best idea and the best data, if it's sort of like hidden in a drawer or you don't tell anybody about it, you know, it doesn't have any influence. So this is sort of like what we need to be so much better in doing. So I think we should be better at putting these ideas and information in a more simplistic, or not maybe simplistic, but sort of like understandable or more relatable way.
Yeah, relatable. I think that that's an important part. Make it relevant to the
Yeah.
people you're trying to communicate with. I think that's a great point. Now, I'm curious, one of the things we talked about earlier a couple of days ago was the difference between policy making versus the implementation of policy. And I wonder, when it comes to implementation of policy around energy policy, are we there yet? Do you think that we need, what kind of work still needs to be done to sort of advance the implementation of policy?
Well, we can see many good examples of good implementation strategies. So I would be positive towards that we are seeing how we can do it. I always say that it's maybe easier to do a good policy than to follow through with a good policy. But however, I think on the policy level and on the local level, you are getting more in tune to, because also you're making the policy better by being more inclusive on the earlier level. So yeah, I would say that I'm rather positive and seeing positive signs that we are getting better in implementing these policies.
And are you seeing the policies evolve? I mean, we see I think there's a growing recognition as we talk about climate change and the need for more sustainable approaches to energy and the need to get off non-renewable forms of energy. That, you know, we see that there's more and more effort being made. Are we headed in the right direction from a policy perspective to enable communities in the Arctic to make that transition to more sustainable solutions?
I would say that we are on the way. However, maybe a little bit still too stuck in the large policy area. But if we talk about all the examples that we have here today, they're all really linked to the local level and making the best use, sort of like instead of getting import energy far away, using the energy that you have on site. So I would say that in this way we are seeing really positive signs. However, we have COVID, we have which had a little bit hampered our way of doing things. However, I think that because the Arctic is really resilient, that we are used to communicate, for example, through technology, because it's so difficult to travel between places. So maybe these resilient communities will be those that will be the winner in the end out of this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christine. It's been great to really put policy in this conversation. I think we often forget and we separate it out into a box, and it's such a critical part of having successful initiatives around energy, around all things related to Arctic resilience. So please, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you.
I now, as we come to a close, I'm going to hand the mic back over to Chief Dana, who is going to tell us, really put this in perspective as why is this important? Why should we care about renewable energy for Arctic communities? So Chief Dana, if you could.
Merci, Cho, and again, appreciate the opportunity and the question especially. You know, I find it very interesting in these times as people who did not have any association with the Gregorian-Julian calendar or did not quantify time the way that we see it now. This allowed my people to foment their own disposition chronologically, spiritually in the world. I certainly enjoy the conversations on policy and the rest because one of the natural maxims of nature is that Mother Nature banks on diversity and rewards cooperation. I don't see that the Indigenous way of life is diametrically opposed to modern life. What I do see, however, is that the proclivities of industrialization have left the gravity, and we are now suspended in an entropy of modernization. But what permeates every sphere of these tools, and let's be honest, the economy, machines, all of these are tools. But if we don't remember who we are, these tools will wield us. It was not man that domesticated wheat in the Fertile Crescent. It was wheat that domesticated man. We have to be very conscious and strong in our identities when we move towards this modernization. So for the Arctic peoples, we have been allowed to foment and hold on to another side of experiencing this universe. And I see us now more than ever as these limbic systems, if you will, these causeways between our societies will allow for the sharing of ideas that can inform policy, that can inform the economies. And I see us as having a responsibility with our treaty partners and with the rest of the world to bring the ideals that have allowed us to thrive in these regions, to respect the subtleties and nuances in the systems, the natural systems, and breathe that into policies, legislations, and technologies to inform economies that foment strength. Because we see this time and time again and tested and proved in the Arctic. When we talk about the Porcupine Caribou herd, the largest land animal migration on Earth comes from a fragile area and plain in the Northeast Alaska, where there are still tire tracks from over 30 years ago. Such a fragile area can be a wellspring of strength. This is what we need to bank on. And I'm so proud to be on this call today and be able to speak about the rising pillars of strength from Indigenous and non-Indigenous Arctic communities that are taking this sovereignty seriously. And this will support our country in its movement forward. We are a resilient and self-determined people. Our communities are as such as well, as you would have to be in such an area. And I really would like to bring it back full circle now to this idea of decentralization, and that there are many people around the world who understand what the problem is. If we can empower them and show them some solutions, just watch what our countries and what our world can do. And I know that there are large issues facing us as well as my own community. But for the very fact of already have galvanizing some of these technologies and anchoring those incredible, unthinkable solutions in the communities, we are already doing this. And it is that kind of vacuum coming from a place of strength that will allow us at the end of the day to reach our goals and to do so together. Merci.
Thank you so much, Chief Dana. I think I speak for all of us when I say that with leaders like you in the Arctic, I think we're on an amazing track, and I'm proud to be able to work with GCI and with you on these types of initiatives, because you truly are leading the way in this capacity. I now want to pass the mic to my colleague, Joel Clement from the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center and Arctic Initiative, where he's a senior fellow, and he is going to close things off for us today as my partner in crime on the Arctic Resilience Forum. So Joel.
Well, thanks so much, Jen, and thanks so much to the panelists and the organizers of this session. What a fantastic bunch of ideas. This was a very exciting and inspiring session. I want to particularly thank Chief Dana for some of the things he said, particularly, he talked about the dramatic Arctic transformation we've faced. And I loved how he described how he could slide through time by talking with and learning from elders. And this is what resilience demands that we do. We need to slide through time, and in particular, slide into the future to imagine a thriving Arctic many years from now. And that's exactly what these panelists were doing with these innovative ideas you heard about today. And as you heard, this future vision is not just about having the ideas, it's also about creating enabling conditions to allow these ideas to flourish. And these conditions, they could be financing, they could be policy, it could be inclusiveness or a societal commitment to resilience. So this means it's not just about the innovators and the entrepreneurs that you're hearing from today, it's about all of us stepping up to foster those enabling conditions. For example, in the first Resilience Forum session 2 weeks ago, we learned about the importance of investing in and supporting Indigenous youth leaders. The following session, we learned that none of this matters if we can't find a way to ensure food security in the Arctic. And in next week's session, we'll explore human health concerns and what we've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. All of the following sessions that come after that focus on different enabling conditions, whether it be gender equity, access to internet, finance, thriving ecosystems, and improved compatibility among Arctic knowledge systems. In other words, the resilience lens allows us to slide through time and examine how all these factors influence and amplify one another. So deep thank you from all of us at the Harvard Arctic Initiative, the Sustainable Development Working Group, and the Icelandic Chairmanship for joining in on these resilience conversations. Thanks to a fantastic panel of experts. Please register and tune in for next week's session at the same time for the much anticipated session on human health and pandemics. And in the meantime, stay resilient, stay engaged, and stay healthy. Masicho.